Time and again, the search for gold is something that has driven man to some of the most desolate parts of the planet. It all seems to be worth it, especially as the rewards seem to outweigh the costs. At least, that is what many of these miners let us feel as we watch them on the Gold Rush TV show. When the likes of Parker Schnabel or Tummy Beats come together with the rest of the team to measure the gold they had spent the last week gathering or the entire season toiling for gold, we almost forget all the almost insurmountable challenges that these people had to face so that they could get their hands on that precious gold. Just look at the time that Parker decided that it was worth investing a whopping $15 million at the start of the season. This was because he saw the need to buy Dominion Creek. Now, some were caught by surprise by this move, especially as Parker and his crew seemed to have enjoyed one of their most successful seasons ever. Apparently, this was because just the season before, Parker and his team succeeded in extracting 8,000 ounces of gold. As you can imagine, this was worth a ton of moolah, $14 million to be exact. Understandably, this was a massive win for Parker and his team. With all that money in the bank, there is no doubt that Parker and his crew must be the best miners in town, at least for the time being. To be honest, their work proved to manifest the reward they got at the end of the season. Their focus paid off to a high extent. The men toiled through the soil beside their constantly working wash plant. Thankfully, their work paid off because they were lucky enough to work on a ground that was rich with gold. With this knowledge in mind, the team knew that success was only a matter of time. Everything seemed to go seamlessly, especially as the two wash plants decided that they were not going to stop until their men came away with the gold that they came out there for. As such, Parker must have been thrilled to have Big Red and Slucifer working in tandem with his miners. With those two wash plants coming into play in collaboration with the other factors, the team couldn't stop pumping out gold every week. With that in mind, Parker was not ready to rest on his laurels. Sure, things were going well, but he knew that he still had some work to do when it comes to making things better for himself and his team. At that point in time, the estimation of Parker's operation was that it was lean, mean, and efficient. In the end, we can all see the rewards of such a hardworking season because at the end of the day, they walked away with $14 million. Despite this thought, Parker knew that no one is guaranteed success forever. Maybe this was because he realized that the profitable mines that he found in Scribner's Creek weren't going to give him all the gold that he wanted forever. In fact, after mining in the area for many years, it was his belief that the gold was starting to run out. At that point in time, he figured that all the easily accessible gold was mostly gone. And for a mine boss such as Parker, all that gives you is a massive headache. As such, Parker knew that he had to get to work. How was he going to fix this problem? There was no more easy gold in Scribner's Creek for Parker and his team. What is the long-term solution for this? You couldn't blame him for thinking about this at that point in time, because even despite the amount of success that he experienced in Scribner's Creek, he would need to find a way to get to some gold when the next season begins. With that in mind, he knew that he needed to come up with something big. He needed to find something that guaranteed the level of success that he had enjoyed in the last season. Maybe he could even go somewhere that could help his team grow even more. As the gears in his mind churned, the answer suddenly came to him. He was going to have to head over to Dominion Creek. As great as Dominion Creek sounded to Parker, he knew that acquiring this piece of land for himself and his team was not going to be easy at all. For starters, there was the massive asking price that stood as a deterrent to anyone interested in the claim. Who actually had $15 million to spare? As massive as this price tag is, Parker couldn't help but take the bait. This is because if he was actually able to acquire Dominion Creek, then he and his team would have a place to work for many years to come. This is because many believed that the place still had placer gold deposits. This may not sound like much to the layman, but to Parker and his team, they were looking at a piece of land that could help them acquire more than $160 million over the next few years. Add the fact that they had just enjoyed, and Parker knew that he and his team were under pressure to keep this level of success going. Would Parker and his team be able to ride this wave if they succeed and change, or will they drown under the pressure? With that in mind, you could understand how Parker was worried that investing in Dominion Creek could prove to be a $15 million mistake. However, Parker knew that he had to throw the dice in what could prove to be the biggest gamble of his entire gold mining career. Sure, they claimed that there was a chance that he could get a whopping $160 million from this deal. However, the massive costs of $15 million could prove to be too much of a challenge for these guys. Despite this challenge, Parker really had to consider spending all that money to get this place. After all, if the calculations are correct, Dominion Creek could help him dominate the mining game for the next few years or so. As such, you could see how the risk was worth the reward for him. After all, he wasn't just buying tons of dirt when he bought his piece of land. No, he was acquiring the gold that could secure the future for himself, his team, and all their families. With a reputation for having a life-changing amount of gold, Parker just couldn't ignore this place. Considering all these factors, there still wasn't any guarantee that Parker and his team would get the success they think they deserve when they acquired this property. Even if they had a solid map of all the gold deposits in the place, and even though they had some success mining in the past, there was every chance that Parker could be buying a dud. What if there is gold down there, but it's just too difficult to extract from the land in Dominion Creek? Well, there was only one way to find out, and that was to dive in. While accepting the risks involved in owning this land, Parker decided that he was going to buy this land and make it work. Such is the life of a gold miner like Parker. Believe it or not, paying this $15 million would be the easiest and perhaps least exciting part of the whole ordeal with the land on Dominion Creek. Following the $15 million investment made by Parker Schnabel in Dominion Creek, Parker and his crew knew that there was no going back now. Once the money was paid, Parker did all he could to rally the troops. With new land, new crew setups, new roads, and new wash plant locations, it had a feel that the team was starting from scratch on this new land. At least, that is how it felt from the moment they made their way out there. The team knew that they had to earn their success. Sure, there was a lot of promise in the land thanks to its rich history and all, but Parker and his team could not ignore the fact that the land had a ton of problems. For starters, the team had to get through all the mud in the place. Not an easy task to overcome, especially as this was accompanied with the constant breaking down of their equipment, all of which gave Parker and the rest of the team a ton of headaches. As you can imagine, this just made the whole situation a lot harder than they bargained for. With all these problems coming into play as they tried to dig for gold in the area, the team was forced to realize that they were working on a piece of land that is foreign to them. After all, this was not Scribner Creek, and as such, they had to get accustomed to the layout of the new piece of land that they were working on. Over time, they would learn that not only was Dominion Creek bigger, it was much more complicated than the former claim. Considering this, they knew that they had new roads to build, new wash plant sites to develop, and the thankless tasks of hauling pay dirt over long distances. With such a difficult set of circumstances coming into play, they eventually came to realize that their tasks were hard and time-consuming. Add the fuel and the manpower that this took to put together, and you couldn't blame Parker or his men for wondering about what they had gotten themselves into. As if that wasn't bad enough, the team soon realized that they had a ton of equipment problems to deal with. As you can imagine, this is one of the last things that they would want while working out there in their mines. Some could say that this all started when Parker noticed the rate at which pay dirt was being fed into the slewers. Hoping to push on with the level of production, Parker demanded that they increase the rate at which the slewers were being fed the pay dirt by 20%. Crew members, such as Alex, complied with this demand, even though he may have been skeptical about this move. However, he couldn't say much because more dirt being fed into the slewers meant more gold for Parker and his crew members. Alex and the rest of the crew members pushed on with this increase of pay dirt being fed into the slewers. They hoped that with luck on their side, such a gamble would pay off. However, this gamble would take a bit of a hitch when something strange and unexpected took place. A series of breakdowns would make work rather difficult for Parker and the rest of the team. First, it was the conveyor belt. That wasn't too tragic for Parker and the team, with some saying that the team didn't take too much of a blow in morale when it happened. After all, any time spent not working because of their damaged equipment could mean the loss of thousands upon thousands of dollars per hour. After overcoming this blow, they then had to persevere through the bad feelings that spread through the crew when they realized that their feeder was jammed and their pump had given out. More problems would lead to an almost unrecoverable loss for the team. As you can imagine, the team was feeling a lot of pressure. Sure, they did all they could to overcome this issue, but you couldn't blame them for feeling sore about their activities for a moment or two. This was because alongside the unfamiliarity, the team knew that this meant longer hours for them. This also meant that they had to endure harder work and even more stress for them. As if that wasn't bad enough, the team also had to deal with the fact that some of the crew members were green. Sure, they did all they could to make themselves useful, especially those who may have worked with Parker at some point in time in the past, but there was a limit as to all they could do in a place that was so foreign to them. That said, the more experienced members of the team were able to maintain their composure. Sure, things were looking bad at the moment, but they were able to maintain a level of patience that helps them keep things going. Imagine having to keep your composure in such a situation. Imagine being Parker. He must have been shaking in his boots considering all the money that he had invested in such a place. You can imagine all the stress that he felt as he thought about all the risk that he had taken just to get this piece of land. What if it was all for nothing? That would mean that he would be $15 million in debt. As you can imagine, that is a nightmare for anyone trying to run any type of business. The interesting thing about all of this is that if they had gotten their hands on a good amount of gold, maybe things would have gone better. Alas, as bad as things were, it got even worse because they were not getting gold as quickly as they wanted to. Sure, the reason Parker bought this place was because of its reputation for gold, but right now, the reputation isn't proving itself to be true. The truth of the matter is that finding gold and extracting it from the earth is not an easy task at all. What the team remembers is that the first few weeks were slow when it came to the extraction of gold from Dominion Creek. The initial results were somewhat discouraging because some test cuts came up short. This meant that they had used up a ton of fuel and time all for nothing. One of the worst things about it is that they got very little for their efforts. That means that they couldn't afford all the failures that they had to endure up until that point in time. To make things even worse, the weather proved to be unfriendly to Parker and his crew members. Some could blame this on the higher elevation that could be found in Dominion Creek. The team found that as a result, they experienced heavy rains that turned the land to mush. As a result, they were forced to endure as the rain and mud slowed everything down. Heck, it probably added to the damage that all their equipment suffered as time went on. What an annoying predicament for Parker and the team. They had to make sure that they were level-headed as they dealt with all their problems. Millions of dollars had been spent on getting the crew and their equipment out there. As if that wasn't bad enough, they had no gold to show for this. Again, Dominion Creek wasn't living up to its fertile reputation. Looking at the situation, Parker knew that he had to get a handle on the situation, and he had to as possible. Millions of dollars were at stake. Thankfully, Fate had plans to get in line with the plans cooked up by Parker and his team. The tide seemed to turn when they came across this new cut. Turns out that as they were digging into said cut, they realized that one section of the ground seemed to look more promising than others. However, you couldn't blame Parker and the rest of the team for feeling unsure about diving into this new portion of land. This is understandable because it had taken them a lot of time, fuel, and effort just to get to this point. However, all doubt seemed to wash away when they passed the pay dirt through their plant. When they saw all the gold that came through the soul box, they knew that they had finally made a hit. Now there was every chance that they were going to get their hands on the gold that they came out there for. Noticing that they were on the verge of achieving some success, they made all the necessary adjustments needed to put these things together. This proved to be a great decision because the more they dug into the ground, the more gold they got their hands on. As fortunate as this may seem, it was clear that this wasn't a matter of luck. Parker and his crew had worked hard and had trusted the process despite all the hitches that occurred along the way. Things looked like they were on the up, and even Parker was able to break into a smile as he watched the progress as it occurred. His smile told us that there was every chance that they could make this season successful. Maybe it could even be more successful than their last season. With that in mind, the team pushed on to dig up as much gold as possible. Despite all the problems that they faced, they were able to get a good amount of gold. So much so that the team figured that it was time to measure all the gold that they had extracted from Dominion Creek. You couldn't blame them really. With Sluifer running nonstop for some time now, they could have extracted more gold than they estimated so far. In that time, it had averaged about 145 ounces of gold per week. When the appointed time came, the team was delighted to find that they had almost 300 ounces of gold with them so far. That meant that they had made about $540,000 so far. So far so good, right? Add the fact that both the slewers were hard at work during this time, and that meant that there was a chance that they were even richer than the $540,000 that they had managed to extract with their first sluifer. Despite all the trouble, their other succeer helped them get about 453.80 of gold. This meant that they had made about 120,000 per day while they were out there. In total, there was about 723.85 ounces of gold with them thanks to all the work that they had done. This was massive because this was their biggest gold haul for the season. This meant that they had made about $1.4 million so far, and as such, everyone was jumping for joy. This means that they were well on their way to making all the money that they had invested in this land so far. That said, they knew that the pressure wasn't off. If anything, this was just the beginning of it all. They had already lost a ton of time and other resources to the cause. Let's see if Parker and his crew had everything it took for them to make a success out of this season. Already they had been through a lot, but with some grit, they were able to persevere so that they could overcome their challenges. Let's see if they will eventually be able to dominate Dominion Creek.